Causes of the American Revolution. Go ahead and write down the following standards. SS 7C13. So this is colonial concerns and the writing of the Declaration of Independence. Here's the vocabulary for homework. So we're going to go over Parliament, the English legislature. That is England's Congress. To tax is money charged by a government for services. When people boycott, it's to refuse to buy. Legislature is a governing body responsible for laws. Levy is to collect. So if we say to levy taxes, it's to collect. Taxation without representation is unfair tax to someone without giving them a voice. This happened to the colonists. Propaganda is used to influence one's opinion. And a monopoly is when someone has complete ownership or control of the entire supply of goods or services. France and the Native Americans fought against the British and the 13 colonies for control of North America in the French and Indian War. Of 1754 through 1763. This war was very costly. England did win the war and got control of Canada and the English colonies. However, because it was so costly, it caused Britain to be in debt. Where do you think the British would get its money from? The 13 colonies. By this time, the English colonies were Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Taxes on the colonists. The British implemented taxes on the colonists to make up for the cost of the French and Indian War. So the Sugar Act of 1764 taxed sugar and molasses. The Quartering Act of 1765 and 1774 forced colonists to house British troops. They had to allow British soldiers in their houses. They could sleep in their beds, take their food. They had to welcome them into their houses. The Stamp Act of 1765 taxed official documents and cards. So examples would include like newspapers, pamphlets, licenses, legal documents, playing cards, and things like that. The Townshend Acts of 1767. So the Townshend Acts of 1767 taxed glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea. The colonists had no direct representation in Parliament. So their famous quote was "no taxation without representation." Colonists were not happy that they were being taxed without being represented in any form of government. They felt that all of their taxes were not coming back to them. They didn't see them. They felt as if all of their taxes were going to England just to benefit people in England. It wasn't coming back to them in the colonies. Colonists also didn't have fair trials, freedom of speech, rule of law, representation in Parliament, and much more. Sons of Liberty was a group that formed. It was a secret group. They originally started this group to protest the Stamp Act. Sam Adams was the leader, and we're going to see a lot of protests form because of this group. The Boston Massacre began on March 5th, 1770, with a small argument between British soldiers and colonists. The argument escalated, and colonists began to harass and throw sticks and snowballs at British soldiers. British soldiers then fired into the crowd. 3 colonists died immediately, and 2 more died later from wounds. The Boston Massacre became a rallying cry for patriotism in the colonies. However, both sides used this event as propaganda. The Tea Act of 1773. The Tea Act of 1773 required colonists to buy tea from the British East India Company. Why do you think colonists preferred to buy more expensive tea on the black market? On December 16, 1773, the Sons of Liberty, led by Sam Adams, planned to show Parliament how they felt about the Tea Act. They really hated it. So they boarded the British ship called the Dartmouth, which was docked in the Boston harbor. They dressed up as Native Americans and dumped the entire load of tea into the water. This event came to be known as the Boston Tea Party. In response to the Tea Party, the British implemented the Intolerable Acts. These are also known as the Coercive Acts. So if you see either one, they're both the same thing. And the Intolerable Acts of 1774 closed the Boston harbor until all the tea was paid for. The colonists had to supply and house British troops, and British officials couldn't be charged with a crime. There's no rule of law there. So this document should look familiar. Common Sense in 1776 was written by Thomas Paine, who we all know, T-Pain, and this influenced many people to want independence from Great Britain. So Common Sense sold more than 150,000 copies. It was 75 times more than an average successful paper. So obviously this had a huge direct impact on the colonies to want independence.
And it's too late to apologize. It's too